Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make some apple crumb bars and then a Italian sausage Tuscan or white bean Tuscan soup. And we're going to make a sandwich using the leftovers of our quick challah bread from yesterday. So let's start by getting our apple crumb bar ready. So I've got 2 apples. We need about 2 cups of, peeled and thinly sliced apples for our crumb bar. So let's get this kind of going here. I'm just going to, pour it and then we'll peel off the skin and then I'll use my big butcher, my other knife to kind of trim it up and slice it thin. With this, you want to make sure you slice them really thin because you need them to cook up pretty quickly in the oven under the time. And if you leave them too thick, they're not going to be soft and tender. And then your apple bar will have, a crunch to it versus being like very soft apples. So when we get to slicing them, we'll do it nice and thin. I'm using some Jonathan apples that we picked at the orchard this past weekend. And they've been actually delicious in the baked goods I've been making. Jonathan is not a very common apple to get at the store, but they are delicious for both eating and baking. So we've got our first apple kind of peeled here. And again, I find it's just easier to do it with a paring knife than trying to peel it with, an apple core peeler. I used to have one of those like old school ones where you put the apple in and you cranked it and it decored it and like gave you this like really long snaky skin of apple skin. But it still took forever to do. I can peel my apple faster this way than going through that whole setup. Okay. And we're just about there. These I think are going to be so delicious because I'm just really making kind of like a crumb topping base that's going to be used on the top and the bottom of these bars. And then we'll have our kind of spiced apple mixture in the middle. And then we'll put the crumb topping on the top. And I love little like bars. They're just so delicious. It's kind of like a half of a Dutch apple pie. Okay, we've got our little apples here, peeled and ready. Again, we want to, lost part of my apple, but good thing I had more than enough. We're going to do really thin slices on here. And so I want them kind of, nice and thin. And you don't need to get out like a specialty tool like a mandolin to do it. You can really just do it with your chef knife as it is. You don't, I have a mandolin and I just never use it because it's one of those things where it's more of a hassle to set it up, to slice everything thin for like 2 apples versus, doing it with your knife. Plus, I still remember my sister-in-law cut the tip off of her finger using one of those once, so I'll be safe with my knives. Again, nice and thin on here because if you leave them too thick, they won't get soft and tender. And this will also allow them to pick up some more flavor. Almost to the point where they start to get a little translucent. It will also allow them to lay nicely on your bar. We've actually gone through about half of our apples that we picked from the orchard. So we've gone through about 25 of them since Saturday. My kids have been loving them in their lunches. Evie has been having them in their lunch and at dinner every single day. She goes, these are the best apples ever. And I'm like, part of it, I think they taste so good is because, you picked them yourself. So they instantly feel better.
Angel likes your cutting board.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I have these random cutting boards that I swear I've had for 15 plus years. And I've got like an orange, a lemon, a lime, and an apple. And they're like the cheesiest things, but I love them. And they're perfect for when I just need a small cutting board. But I can't even remember when I've got them. I've had them for so long. Here we go. Okay. It's actually perfect. I need just about 2 cups of my thinly sliced apples. And then we're going to toss these with a little bit of cinnamon and vanilla just to kind of start with, and a little bit of apple cider. So I've got my cinnamon here. I'm going to sprinkle about, I want to say, a teaspoon over it. I want a good amount because I want that cinnamon flavor to pop in. And it looks more than it, but cinnamon puffs out very, big and lays flat. We're going to put in about a half a teaspoon of vanilla. And then we're going to do about a tablespoon of apple cider. You could also use lemon juice if you wanted. And this is just going to help it kind of coat up our apples. And we're going to put in just about, a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of brown sugar to kind of sweeten it up a little bit. But most of the sweetness is going to come from the crumb topping that will be on the bottom and the top of this bar. Let me grab a fork here or a spoon here. We're going to toss it real quick and then just kind of let it sit. Here we go. Now, I like to use, a lot of times, if I don't have apple cider, I will use like fresh lemon juice. But when I do have apple cider, I like to use that instead because I feel like it really brings the apple flavor out even more in the apples. But here, we've got our kind of nicely coated up apples. They'll have lots of flavor with them. Now let's make our crumb topping here. And I'm actually going to be kind of doing this old school where I mix the flour and the butter together using my hands. Works, I think, better that way.
You have a question? Have you used the apple cider to make any drinks or only for baking?
Well, we've been drinking the straight up apple cider. My kids have loved it. I was sitting there, I'm like, we've got 1 more gallon in the fridge. But if we run out and we still have apples, I do have a juicer, so I might make some more apple cider. But it actually turns out we're going to be going back to Bowling Green, which is where this apple orchard is, in about 2 or 3 weeks. My daughter has a soccer game there, and they have Pumpkin Fest that weekend, and there's more apples. They have the other varieties that we can pick. So I think I'll be back to get more apple cider and more apples then, because I will say I just love apples and apple flavored everything, and it's fall. It fits nicely. But I was reading this magazine, and they were talking about doing this like apple cider bar where you actually like create all these little mix-ins that you can add to your apple cider. And it's like one of those things where I think the kids would really love that, just adding the fun stuff to it. We're going to start with a cup of all-purpose flour, and then we're going to do a mixture of brown sugar and granulated sugar. So half a cup of granulated and half a cup of brown. Now you could also do all brown sugar if you wanted more of that molassesy flavor in the crumb. I like doing it half and half, gives it a little bit blonder and makes it, more mild. But if I wanted it to be like really fall tasting, I would use, instead of cinnamon, I'd use pumpkin pie spice and then do all brown sugar. So we've got our 2 sugars in here. Now we're going to add in our oats, but we're going to add that in just a little bit. We're going to mix in first. Let's kind of combine these. Again, I'm going to do it with my hands because I'm going to be kind of squishing the flour in, or the butter into the flour using my hands. So I'm just breaking this up. Here we go. And now we're going to add in about a teaspoon of cinnamon. And again, you could totally measure this out, but I feel like cinnamon's one where you can go and double it and you're not going to be that crazy off. That's about a little bit more. So we've got about a teaspoon of cinnamon in here. We're going to mix it in. And then we're going to add in about a half a teaspoon of salt. So I'm just going to give it a light little pinch. We're doing a lot of free measuring today. I feel like this is one of those things where, it's going to bake up well no matter what. I've got a half a cup of softened butter. And pull it on here because I want to pull off all those little bits of it. And what we're going to do is I'm going to kind of mix my butter in with my fingers where I am pinching it through it. So kind of like an old school way of making a crumb, like a pie if you don't have like a pastry cutter. But we're going to go in and just kind of keep pinching it through your fingers until it all kind of works up. Then we're going to add in our oats. But you want to do it before you add in the oats because you want that butter to kind of crumble into the flour. And it works as you got to use softened butter. You can't use cold butter for this. Here we go. And it honestly, the method is you just kind of grind it through your hands like this. And what you want is you're going to, if you got kids and you know what like kinetic sand is, it's going to be like the texture of kinetic sand where when you pinch it together, it holds together, but then it kind of falls back down. And I've got kinetic sand on my mind because my little boys were playing with it today. And Jack, who is almost 2 and he acts as though he is 2, felt the need that we have like a mini sensory table for it, and I have it filled up with kinetic sand. And he felt the need to throw it all over our playroom this morning. No remorse whatsoever for his actions. And then he decided he was going to put it on his head and then on his brother's head. I was like, oh, and this is why we don't play with the kinetic sand when you're awake. Okay, we've got our crumb mixture in here. Just shake off my hands a little bit here. And we're going to add in a whole cup of oats. And this is going to be the base for our top and the bottom of our apple crumb bar. I'm using old-fashioned oats. You could also use quick oats. Just don't use steel-cut oats or you're going to have a very crunchy, hard, chewy bar. Okay, I'm going to go in again with my hands and we're just going to mix it through here. And the reason why I don't add in the oats first is I want that butter to get mixed into that flour and sugar mixture first. But look how delicious this crumb is looking. Okay. Now let's assemble this. So I got to put my baking spray over here. We're just going to grease my pan. You can use an 8x8 or a 9x9 inch pan. We're just going to grease it up. And this is going to allow it to come out nicely when we're done with it. And then I'm going to take roughly half of this mixture and we're going to put it on the bottom and then we're going to firmly press it down. And this is going to make the bottom base of our bar. And you want to make sure you kind of press it down just like if you're doing like a graham cracker crust or whatnot. So that it holds together. And then as it bakes, this will form, the bottom crust because it's, pushed down. It will actually form together almost like, a bar. And then we'll have our apples and then the top crumb will be sprinkled over on top. You see, I'm pushing it down nice and firm. And it's making its nice kind of little base here. And I think we're good. Now we're going to take our apples here and we're going to lay them over the base of this. And again, you want about 2 cups of thinly sliced apples. And I'm just going to try to lay them as flat as possible. I don't want them to have a lot of gap between them. And we'll do our thin layer. Here we go. And again, pushing it down and making sure. And I used, again, a very simple, cinnamon, a little bit of vanilla, and some apple cider to season up our apples. But you could definitely go more fall-y, use like a pumpkin spice or add in some ginger, cloves, nutmeg in here. And then if you don't have apple cider, you can use lemon juice. Here we go. So we've got our apples in here. I'm going to push those down. Kind of, again, you want to just make sure they're as flat as possible so you don't have any big gaps between them. Oops, have one more. Pop it right here. And now we're going to go back in with our crumb topping. We're going to place this right over the top. And with this, you're not going to pat it down. You're just going to lay it right on top like this. Here we go. This is going to give you the nice crumb loose topping on there. That will be so lovely as that butter melts that we mixed into it will form together. Okay, let me wash my hands and we're going to pop this in the oven. Okay, so I have my oven set at 350 and we're going to let it bake for about 30 minutes. And this should be done right when our soup is going to be done, our soup and our sandwich. So I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to push it towards the back so it gets that most of that heat. And then I'm going to set my timer for 30 minutes. It should never take, it's perfectly, I've done it a couple of times before and it's right at 30 minutes. But some people's ovens cook a little faster or a little high heat. So if your oven, if you notice it kind of toasters at top, after about 20 to 25 minutes of baking, put a piece of aluminum foil over it so you don't get that super toasted top. But I like my oven. I know, everybody gets to know their oven, and mine, I know how it cooks well. So 30 minutes is perfect on it. But sometimes people say, it can take like a little bit more or a little bit less depending on your oven. Okay, I'm going to start heating up my Dutch oven here, and we're going to start making our Tuscan white bean soup. We're going to use Italian sausage in it. I'm going to add just, about a teaspoon of olive oil. We don't need much because the sausage already has a good amount of fat in it.
You have a question about the apple bars. If you were to add a nut to it, what type would you pick?
I would say either a pecan or a walnut. I find taste really well with it. You could also throw in raisins or craisins. Those also kind of work well with it.
Raisins.
Well, I know those aren't nuts. I was saying, but those are additions that you could add into it. I almost was tempted to throw in some little caramel balls to do a caramel apple bar. And but I said we'll do it, keep it simple now, and then we'll see if I want to do it later, But we're gonna add these in, or our sausage in here, a pound of Italian sausage, and then I'm just gonna use my spatula to start breaking it up, and we'll let that toast up, and then we'll start prepping our vegetables for our soup. Here we go. Well, you know what? You could also do slivered almonds. I feel like slivered almonds, if you mix them into the crumb on the top, would also be really, really delicious. Okay. So I stab the meat a little bit more. I'm just breaking it up because I want my Italian sausage to kind of have some big chunks to it for the base of our soup. I don't want it to be like super fine or massive ones, but kind of like in between. We're going to let that start cooking, and I'm going to start prepping our veggies. I've got one yellow onion here, and we have the veggies in here that are going to really flavor up our broth. It's going to be the onion, the celery, and the carrots are going to add some notes to it. I'm going to be using some chicken bouillon with it, but those I think add really great flavor. And then our vegetables that are really going to add body are our potatoes and our kale. And then I have my white cannellini beans.
Yo has a question for you.
What's for dinner tonight? I am formulating an idea, and I have it. I've got my peppers outside that are ready to be picked. And I'm thinking about making some Mexican stuffed peppers for dinner tonight. But that might change. It might be Italian stuffed peppers. We'll see. I think Mexican because I haven't done Mexican stuffed peppers in a while. And then I'm going to make some homemade applesauce because tomorrow I want to make some applesauce bread. And then we're going to bake up a loaf of sourdough bread. So I think those are, but again, it could change. But that's kind of my idea of what I want to make tonight. Okay, I've got my onions cut up. I did a nice kind of smaller dice on it. And now I've got my celery. We're getting down to the kind of the final bit of this celery. Big chunk of the celery. And what I'm going to do is I want it to be kind of cut up a little bit smaller. So I'm going to kind of trim my stalks so they're not as massive. Keep your leaves. The celery leaves will add really great flavor to the broth. as well as it's just like a little bit of green color. So I never just discard the celery leaves. I do notice when you go to the store a lot, you can just buy the celery that is the main stalk, or like, that's been trimmed up. But the leaves do add great flavor. That's kind of a softer flavor from the celery. So I love them and always keep them or always get them whenever I can. There we go. Again, I'm just doing a smaller dice on my celery here so that it will kind of blend in with our soup. I don't want anything to be too large because I like it to where you can get all different veggies on each bite. Okay, give this a good kind of chop up. Okay. Once our sausage is cooked all the way through, we'll start tossing in our onions and let them cook together for a little bit, and then our celery, and then finally our carrot. I've got 4 good sized carrots here. We're gonna give them a good peel, and then I'm going to I might quarter some of them, and then we'll dice them up as well.
Do you have a question for people that add turnip? Do you know what that adds?
The turnip, well, it's a great fibrous veggie, so it's not going to add so much flavor to the soup, but it will add a lot more fiber to it and bulk, so it's a good filling vegetable on it. I love turnips and and rutabagas as well, which is a form of turnip. I think they're great. I know they have a bit stronger of a flavor, but you can honestly use them just kind of like a potato in soups or whatnot, because they keep their body in shape, very similar. Same with parsnips. Parsnips have a little bit more of a lemony flavor, and they look like white carrots. But those would also kind of be great. But turnips, you could definitely add them in here. They do have, I will say, they're pretty mild in the vegetable. They pick up a lot of their vegetable, but they have a little bit of that pungent flavor that you get with a turnip, but are lovely. There we go. And I've got my carrots all peeled off. When you're using whole carrots like this, you always want to peel them because that outer skin is going to be a bit more chewy. It's going to be an earthier in flavor. So peeling it up is going to leave the nice tender carrot behind. Okay. I'm going to start adding in our onions here and let them start to saute with our Italian sausage. And again, this was 1 whole yellow onion that we diced up. There. And we're going to let it cook up. This is going to give the onions a nice flavor. Also, the onions will start to kind of get a little bit of caramelization. Not as much as if you were to cook the onions by themselves. But with this dish, you kind of really want that sausage flavor to really play a nice role. Okay. So we've got our onions kind of cooking up for our Tuscan white bean soup. Now we're going to kind of cut up our carrots here. I'm going to take the tops and the bottoms off. And then, those onions are steaming into my eyes. And then we're going to, with my fat parts of it, I'm going to probably quarter them. And then my skinnier parts I'll have because I am looking for a smaller, again, dice to it. That's going to allow the vegetables, 1, to cook up faster, so your soup will be done faster, and 2, it will allow you to get more veggies in every bite, like the flavor of them all together. So let's get these chopped up. Now you could always use, if you don't want to go through the work, you can always get baby carrots and then just dice them up as well. Popular misconception, baby carrots aren't actually baby carrots. They're regular sized carrots that have just been washed and trimmed down into the little bite-sized pieces. Which then apparently ever since when they started doing that, carrot consumption went up by 500%. I think that started back in the early 90s was when they started doing the pre-washed and the baby carrots. I just guess making it more convenient made people eat them more versus you know, having to trim up your carrots at home or make them into little crudités. Here we go. Get our last little bit. Okay, we got our carrots, our celery prepped. Let me give our onions a little bit of a stir. And again, any super big pieces of sausage, I'm just going to break up because again, you don't want to get like a huge chunk of sausage when you're trying to eat your soup. Okay, let's get a good scoop around. And then we're going to add in our celery. And then lastly, we'll add in our carrots. I like to do my more aromatic veggies first with the, you know, my firm aromatic ones. So the celery and onions first, so they let out their flavor more. And then we'll do our carrots in. So give this a good stir. And then we're going to let those saute for a second. Okay. Now let's start prepping up our potatoes. So I'm actually think I might just use, I've got 3 baby gold potato, or not baby, but Yukon gold potatoes here that I'm going to cube up. I might just use 2. I'm going to see how they look when I cut them up. But I'm going to cut them up into smaller cube-like pieces. Now, when you're going to use potatoes in a soup, if you're not going to like blend the soup, then you want to use a waxier potato like a Yukon Gold or a red potato and kind of avoid the russet potatoes. Russet potatoes, they're less waxy, which means they disintegrate as they cook. And if you cook them too long, they'll just turn to mush in your soup. But waxier potatoes like, you know, the Yukon will hold its shape and keep its form and will be tender, but will keep its form. So they're more ideal for soups where you want chunks of potatoes in. There we go. And vice versa, I find mashed potatoes, I prefer them with russets over like a Yukon Gold or whatnot because it's going to give me, russets give you the really light and fluffy mashed potatoes, where a Yukon Gold will give you a denser, more like sticky mashed potato. And I think we'll be set with 2. Okay. Give this a good scrape around. And then we're going to add in our carrots. Let those saute up for a second. I always like to give my firm vegetables a good saute before we start adding in our broth. That brings out more flavor, gives a slightly better texture on the veggies too. I never just like to throw them straight into the broth. Okay. And while that's sauteing here, let's get some of our spices in there to kind of cook up as well. We've got bay leaves. I'm going to use some Italian spices, thyme, and oregano and pepper. So let's start with our bay leaves. I'm going to use 2 bay leaves, or like you could do 1 big one or 2 kind of small, medium-sized ones. And I'm going to crush these up in here and there. So I'm just going to kind of keep folding it. This is going to allow the flavor to get out even more quickly than if you just let it seep in there. And when you crush it up, the texture of the bay leaf is going to be very similar to rosemary, which is a little bit of a crispier spice. A lot of times people leave it in a full leaf because it doesn't get soft and you can fish it out on there. But I find when you crush it up, you don't notice it because it's just like some of your more, you know, firm spices. There we go. And then, so we had, you know, either 1 large bay leaves or 2 small ones. Then I'm going to add in about a teaspoon of thyme, a teaspoon of oregano. And you could also use fresh herbs if you wanted, but I didn't feel like walking out to my garden and picking them today. It rained a lot yesterday, so it's kind of a little muddy over there. So I was like, yeah, not today. And then we're going to do a little bit more of my Italian seasoning blend. I'm going to do about a half a tablespoon. So we've got our spices. You want to add your spices in before you add your broth in so that they can toast up, hit that oil, let out their flavors, get a little bit of heat first. This allows them to, one, become more fragrant, and two, melds better into the broth. If you throw your spices in with the broth already in there, they like to float on top. And then they don't let their flavors out quite as much. So really toasting them up in here brings out a lot more flavor. And we're going to add in a little bit of pepper. I'm going to do about, I want to say, a half a teaspoon. So a couple good shakes.
You have a question? Can you substitute in ground beef if you don't care for sausage?
Yes, you could definitely do ground beef or shredded chicken, ground chicken. You could also keep it vegetarian and just have the beans be your protein source in there for it. I feel like the Italian sausage, of course, gives you that little Italian flavor to it, but you could easily just add in, when you're sauteing up the ground beef in the beginning, add in some garlic salt, onion powder, and Italian seasoning. That's going to give your ground beef more of that Italian flavor to it. And you want to make sure you do that when you're sauteing up the beef so that when you're eating it in your soup or you're getting nice flavor out of it. You could also make, some meatballs, like Italian meatballs, and throw them in there as well. But then that adds a whole nother step of work to it. Okay, let's give these potatoes a quick saute here. And then we're going to add in our broth, and we'll let that simmer for a little bit, and then we'll add in our kale and our cannellini beans. And then it will just be simmering, letting those flavors merge together. Okay. So let it sit there. For our soup, I'm going to use 4 cups of water. And then I've got some chicken better than bouillon. We're going to do a good scoop of that. I've got a little left in one, so I'm probably going to have to go for both. And then while that's simmering and whatnot, we'll start working on our sandwiches to go in there. So I'm going to add in a little bit of my broth at first, and then I'm going to deglaze my pan. So I'm going to add in just about a cup at first. And what I mean by deglazing is when you add that little bit of liquid in there, I want you to scrape the bottom of your pan off to take up any of those cooked on spices, little crispy bits of meat. That's going to add a lot of great flavor into your soup and really make the broth It must have just disconnected. It's back on. Okay. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Which is really never a problem for me because I'm a pretty loud person, at least in person at home. Okay, so we're gonna add in the rest of our broth here, or our water. We're gonna turn it into broth in just a second. And then we're gonna add in our chicken bouillon. So I wanna have a nice big scoop of it. So I'm gonna use the rest of this one, which is actually just a small scoop, and then we're gonna open up a new jar of it to add in a little bit more flavor. And the reason I like to use bouillon over like using a chicken broth or something like that is because I find that the bouillon gives more flavor than the straight up like chicken broth that you can buy at a store. So let's get a little bit more here. Open it up. So you can add a little bit more chicken flavor with less liquid, which I find makes your food a bit more flavorful. Assuming we can open it, guys. Oh, let me break that. Got it. And so we've got our big kind of scoop in here. And so it's about a tablespoon of bouillon altogether. And that's going to add the saltiness to our soup. We won't need to add any like extra for the most part. I'm gonna give it a quick taste. I still have beans and kale that we're gonna add, but I wanna make sure it's seasoned right. Beautiful. You've got that nice Italian sausage notes hitting in with that broth and all those spices. I'm gonna add, do I wanna add any more? No, I think we're good. Okay, we're gonna let this simmer, and in a little bit we'll put in, once it comes to a simmer, we'll add in our kale and our cannellini beans. But while we're waiting, let's get our sandwiches ready first, or starting to toast up, because I'm gonna melt some first on here. So I have left over from last night. We ate about half of it, but this is my kind of quick challah bread that I made. I did like a crazy kind of basket weave on it decoration for it last night. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna trim this in half, and then I'm gonna put it on a baking sheet, and we're gonna toast it with a little bit of cheese. Then we'll prep up the rest. We'll take that out and build our sandwich. And I'm just keeping a kind of a really simple sandwich kind of for it. I'm doing an Italian sandwich. So we're gonna use Genoa, hard salami, pepperoni with our mozzarella cheese. So I'm just gonna trim off that end right here. And then I'm just going to really bisect this in half to kind of cut through to make my sandwich. I will say leftover challah bread is so delicious on sandwiches. It's a really soft yeast/egg bread, and it just adds a lot of flavor. This one I seasoned up with rosemary and black pepper, so it has just this really great flavor on it. We're gonna sprinkle, let me grab my baking sheet, and let's put it on here. I'm hoping it's big enough. Yes, that should fit. We're gonna just sprinkle our cheese on it, and then I'm gonna let that toast up in the oven so that it will get a nice melt on it. I'm using mozzarella as our base for it because I think it will pair really well with the pepperoni, salami, and Genoa salami. So just a thin layer. Put a little on this side, and we're gonna do a little top and bottom because gotta love the cheese. And I think the soup is gonna kind of did like a Tuscany soup, and so we're gonna have kind of like an Italian melt, and I feel like they'll pair well together on it. Plus, my husband was like, oh, a salami sandwich would be so good today. And I was like, you know what? It would. It was one of those things growing up. I would visit my grandparents, and that was something we always had, was hard salami sandwiches. And, or head cheese. If you've never had head cheese before, I won't even describe it. You can look it up. It's a very interesting thing, but I grew up eating that, and I really loved it. We can take a quick peek on here. I'm gonna just slide this over so we can kind of cook it on the top, but there's our apple crumb bars, and then we're gonna put that in here, and we're going to let it bake up. And honestly, I think that will probably take about 5 minutes or so to melt up around that, so we'll check on it. And then our crumb bar is gonna be ready soon. So we're getting down to the final few steps of everything. I'm gonna turn my soup up, and let's start prepping up our beans and our kale to go into it. So I'm gonna be using a white kidney bean, or I always say wrong, I wanna say cannellini beans, but it's cannellini. I never actually read it right. But these ones, Great Northern beans, those are all really good ones. You want a white bean. I find the white bean works a little bit nicer in the soup, and it kind of just goes well. You could also use a big butter bean, works well too. Okay. With beans, if you're ever using canned beans, don't just pour your beans in here. The liquid, it's starchy, it's gummy, it's gonna change the flavor of your broth. So you wanna give it a quick rinse so that you get all that starchy liquid off. So we'll give it a couple of good shakes.
You have a request? Can you go over the soup?
Yes, so we are making a Italian sausage Tuscan soup with white beans. We have in here, I'll kind of pull up things. We sauteed up a pound of Italian sausage. Then we have 1 large yellow onion diced up. We have about 4 stalks of celery diced, 4 carrots diced up. And then we added in potatoes. I have about 2, medium-sized Yukon potatoes diced up, and then bay leaves, Italian seasoning, thyme, oregano, and a little bit of black pepper for the spices in it. And then of course we use some chicken bouillon to flavor up our broth. Now we're gonna add in our white beans, 1 can of, I've got cannellini beans, and then we're gonna add in our kale. We're gonna let those simmer together, and then I'm gonna prep my kale here. So I'm just gonna remove all the stalks first. And really the best way to do that is you're just gonna grab and then firmly pull, and you'll get your little twigs out. You can leave the stalkier part if you want to, but that's not gonna get as soft and tender in your soup. And it has a bit more of that sulfury flavor. Here we go. And again, and I like to, you could always buy the bag, like baby kale would work well in here. That's a little bit more of a delicate, tender one. But I just buy a bunch of big stalks because they last forever. And you only need, I think I use 6, maybe 7 leaves here. And then we're gonna just chop them up into smaller bits, because unlike spinach, kale is going to keep its form in your soup, which makes it a great green addition to soups. And it has a pretty mild flavor, so it kind of just melds in, but gives you, again, a little bit more fiber, some folate, and just makes it a little bit healthier. Here we go. We've got my soup is down to a good simmer, so I'm going to turn it down now to about, I'm gonna put it on about a 5, let it simmer. My Dutch oven's gonna keep it at a pretty consistent, nice high heat, so it will continue to simmer well. That's one thing that's nice about using a Dutch oven to cook with, is it does keep it nice and hot and retain it. So when you use like a metal pan or whatnot, every variation that you turn it, it changes pretty drastically quick the temperature of your pan. Versus the cast iron really allows it to stay consistent with more gradual changes. Okay, we've got in our kale. Make sure you push it under and submerge all of it. You want it to cook for a few minutes to get nice and tender. It's not like spinach where you add spinach in at the very end. Kale needs a little bit to cook up to get tender. Here we go. So now we're just gonna let this simmer on our temperature. Let me peek over here. I think we can go check to see if our cheese is melted. It might, we'll see if it needs a little bit longer. I don't want it to be like completely toasted, but a soft kind of melt to it. So, oh, perfect. That's kind of exactly what I wanted. Enough to make it gooey, but I don't want it so much that it's going to kind of separate the fats out and is crispy. So we've got our melted mozzarella cheese on our homemade rosemary challah bread that I baked up last night for dinner. Turn my soup down even lower because we've got, again, a good gradual.
You have a question? Do you like the coated cast iron pans?
I actually do like the coated cast iron pans. I'm using, this one is a Staub, which is just an actual, has a cast iron base on it, but a lot of my Le Creuset ones are the enamel coated, and I do like them because that gives you a non-stick surface that does cook up really well. And I have quite the collection of Le Creuset. I think I have like 20 different types of pots and pans from them. I've just collected them over the years. I still remember the first one I got on eBay when I was like 17 years old. That's why I said I've been loving cooking since I was a kid. And it is still with me, and it was definitely a relic when I bought it. And that just kind of shows you the test of time that a really good pan can keep you. Let me grab my meat over here. There we go. Okay, so for our sandwich today, again, I'm keeping it fairly simple, kind of doing like an Italian melt on here. I've got Genoa salami and hard salami, which taste very similar. Hard salami has a stronger spice profile to it, but I think it's all gonna work really well together. And we're gonna just put, again, a nice kind of layer through all this. So this will make more than, I'm making one big sandwich, but we will trim it up into multiple because this would be a big, big sandwich. So we've got our layer of Genoa. And now we're gonna do hard salami. And I will say, I mean, hard salami just brings it back for me because I always had it as a kid, and then also, you know, growing up, it's very common in Europe to have like sliced meat on bread for breakfast. Before we put this on here, let's go grab our apple bar out of the oven. Okay. Let's see. Grab my bear paw. So here is our apple crumb bar. So the base of this and the top are the same, but with the bottom, we pressed it down firmly to allow it to kind of form a nice crust. And again, this is made with a cup of flour, a cup of oats, half a cup of butter, half a cup of brown sugar, half a cup of sugar, cinnamon, pinch of salt, and then of course we have two thinly sliced Jonathan apples that we seasoned up with apple cider and vanilla and cinnamon. So it's gonna have, again, this lovely kind of like an apple pie bar. Okay, let's finish up making our sandwich here. So we've got our hard salami going on, and again, the main difference between hard salami and Genoa salami is hard salami has more of a spice to it. So think about the difference between like hot dogs and Polish sausage. Polish sausage has a strong spice to it. That's the same thing with the hard salami. And then to bring out a little bit of that kick, we're gonna use a little bit of pepperoni on here to make our little pepperoni layer.
You have a question? Do you have a cookbook available?
I do not have a cookbook. I feel like I get asked that question a lot. I really love cooking, and I feel like it's definitely something I need to do. So many people have asked me about it. So it's on one of my goals for the future, hopefully in this next year, to create one. But I do send out recipe cards for my members. Every week I make a post with about 3 recipes from the week that we've made for them. But I also have all of our videos from our streams we download and add to the link on our page. So anybody can always watch and recreate these meals by just watching the videos again. I try to make sure I go through every single step so that people can truly recreate them. Okay, we've got our layer pepperoni. I'm sure my husband is like, even more, but we're gonna keep it simple. You could throw on a million different things. Pesto, sun-dried tomato pesto would be great. Tomatoes, red onions. I'm keeping it simple because my husband really loves a nice simple sandwich, and I, like it when it's simple because I'm gonna dip it into my soup, and if you have too much on there, then it falls into your soup.
It's the KISS principle.
I'm not familiar with the KISS principle.
Keep it simple, Stephen.
Oh, that one. I was like, I don't know. I'm sitting here thinking about the band KISS, and I'm like, are they known for their sandwiches? Did I miss something? I said wrong generation, maybe. Let's give our soup a little taste. Perfect. I'm gonna try my vegetables, make sure they're soft. But you can see I cut them up really small so that they'll be tender. Perfect. Well, guys, we are ready to serve up our lunch today. Let me get my sandwich here. We're gonna cut it. So I'm actually gonna cut it into 4 because I told you this is a big sandwich, and you want to be able to have it in our soup and whatnot.
You have a question? How do you come up with all your recipes? What's the thought process?
I think about what ingredients I have in my house and what I'm feeling like for the day. And that's kind of what I knew I had leftover bread. So I wanted to make a sandwich, and then I wanted to make Italian sandwich. So then I was like, what soup goes good with Italian sandwich? And I was like, okay, I want to do an Italian soup. But I didn't want to do a tomato-based Italian soup because I just made minestrone last week. And so this deductive, I was like, oh, Tuscan soup. I love a good Tuscan soup. And then I'm like, okay, Pop, I've been cooking for a really long time, since I was 13 years old. So that's coming up on 25 years. And once you've been cooking for such a long time, you just know what vegetables and flavor palettes go together to bring you to the right kind of seasoning that you want, or the broth or the flavors that you want. So I throw my soup out here. So that's kind of the process, is I take what I have or what I'm feeling like, and then I create from that. And that's kind of, it's a random thought process. There's really no logic behind it, but it's a delicious thought process. I'm gonna use, again, I've got my brand new soup bowls. Grab our plates out. Gotta get ready to serve up. But don't you guys love them? These came today, my new bowls. They're from Magnolia, Hearth and Hand. I never can say it right. But they're really cool. I just feel like they feel like fall. So, of course, I have to use them. And then we'll have them with our sandwich. Sit this over here for my husband in a little bit. Okay, let's serve up. I'm gonna move this. So, we will start out with our lunch today. We have our Italian melt. We used our homemade challah bread that we seasoned with rosemary and black pepper. That's what we baked up last night with our dinner. And then we have on here melted mozzarella, pepperoni, Genoa, and hard salami. So you've got all of those delicious salamis. And then we are going to have it with our delicious Tuscan white bean soup made with Italian sausage, potatoes, carrots, celery, kale, and this just delicious fragrant broth that is full of spices. We've got thyme, oregano, bay leaves, and just all these great fall flavors in it. And then for dessert, we have our apple pie bars, or our apple crumb bars, which is made with a really rich crust of, we use butter, flour, oats, brown sugar and white sugar and cinnamon, and then of course 2 Jonathan apples that we seasoned up for just this delicious kind of hybrid between a pie and a crumb, and it's going to be delicious. Well guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so if you ever want to recreate any of our recipes at home, you can just go to that link, search for what we made, and you can watch and cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all the different cooking gear and gadgets that I use in my kitchen. I've got my cutting boards, my knives, I've got my Dutch ovens, all the different gadgets that I use, my pots and pans, for you to check out if you're interested in what we use. But again, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.